Welcome to the 2026 Dialogue, a masterclass series by the HR Association of India. I am Neha Jagnani, and today we are exploring a topic that has become essential to building thriving, future ready organizations. While diversity may open the door, it is inclusion and belonging that determine whether people can truly contribute, grow, and succeed. Our theme for this session today is from diversity to belonging, creating inclusive workplaces that deliver results. To explore this important conversation, we are joined by Harini Krisshnan. Harini is a seasoned HR, DEI, and talent leader with over 15 years of experience in driving people strategy, culture transformation, talent management, and employee experience across global organizations. An IIM alumna and computer science engineer, she's passionate about building inclusive, high performing workplaces and advancing women empowerment, LGBTQ plus inclusion, and CSR initiatives. Recognized with accolades such as the Global Women in Business Leadership Award, Diversity Ambassador of the Year, and 40 Under 40 Changemakers, Harini is known for creating people centric solutions that deliver meaningful business impact. Outside of work, she's an avid reader, nature enthusiast, and proud wrestling supermom. Harini, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much, Neha. Thank you for the beautiful introduction and the opportunity.
Fantastic. So I look forward to this exciting masterclass, Harini. To begin with, my first question for you is diversity initiatives are common today, but many organizations still struggle with true inclusion and belonging. So I want to know, in your view, what is the difference between the three and why does belonging matter for business outcome?
A very important and a basic question. And I think we've spoken about it many times on multiple forums. And I'm so glad to be talking today in the masterclass by HRAI. When we talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, we must first understand that and recognize that these are not same and they are not interchangeable, right? So, there is this famous quote that has been going around since the time D&I became a thing in the world, which is diversity is about getting invited to the party. Right. Inclusion is about being asked to dance, and belonging is the freedom to choose which music you want to dance for, right? So diversity is about, representation. It's having people from different backgrounds, experiences, generations, it could be cultures, genders, perspectives, and so many things within the organization or, an ecosystem. Right. But inclusion is about ensuring those diverse individuals have a voice, they are heard, they have equal opportunities to contribute. Okay. Now, belonging is much deeper and it's also more personal, in my opinion, right? It is the feeling that you can actually show up as your most authentic self. Your ideas are valued. You feel that you're accepted for who you are without needing to conform to a certain group or a strata or status and things like that, right? To your question on why is it important for business, and from a business perspective, I would say that belonging has a direct impact on performance, right? So when an employee feel that they belong, they tend to be more engaged with the organization. They tend to be more innovative. They're more willing to partner and collaborate, and they're more likely to continue to stay with the organization. So in a world where we are talking about talent, creativity, adaptability, and so many other things, creating a sense of belonging is not just another DEI or a HR priority for the company, but it is actually a business.
Sure. Beautifully put, Harini. So inclusion, as you said, that people is when people have a voice, they get equal opportunities. Belonging is goes a little deeper, where you're accepted the way you are. And loved how you said that it has direct impact on the performance, because when people feel that they belong to a particular place, they thrive, they innovate, they feel engaged. So thank you so much for beautifully putting it together. My next question, Harini, is what are some subtle workplace behaviors, systems, or leadership practices that unintentionally make employees feel excluded, and even in organizations that promote diversity?
Yeah, it's a very good question and very practical one too. I always talk about this term called intentional inclusion, right? I say that inclusion has to be intentional. And so, to your question on exclusion, it is similar. Exclusion most often isn't intentional, right? And that's why it becomes sometimes difficult to even identify that, some portion of it has been excluded. It also shows up through everyday behaviors, those small behaviors and organizational practices, right? For example, let's say there is a leader who's seeking some inputs in a group meeting. He or she is seeking inputs from the same set of people. It doesn't have to be with exclusion in the mind, but sometimes, they feel aligned, or maybe they're sitting on the side, which is more prominent to look at people on the left or right. It just could be such small things where others remain unheard, right? Meetings may be dominated by a few voices, and then there are quieter individuals or remote employees who, pretty much feel left out to be able to contribute, right? So, certain visibility for people who are not in direct access of leaders, or all of those things can come across as exclusion.
Right.
I also have one thing that I've personally noticed is that in informal networks, right? For example, it's a chai break or maybe a water cooler conversation when you find a leader talking to or chatting to a group of people or going for a smoke break or maybe a coffee break. Sometimes this becomes perceived bias, right? It also creates invisible barriers, and also it kind of works otherwise for people working in hybrid or a remote work setup, right? So
Sure.
every small things, I think it's important for us to be mindful of it and work around that. So that's what I feel. So exclusion is not intentional, but I think it's high time now we make both inclusion intentional and be mindful of what can possibly be considered or perceived as exclusion.
Sure, sure. Very, very important to be mindful of our actions and be aware of what our actions could lead to. It prevents us from making any unconscious bias towards anybody in our ecosystem. So thank you so much. Moving on to my next question, Harini, which is how can leaders create culture of belonging across multi-generational, multicultural, and hybrid work environments where, without making it feel performative?
Yeah. Um, this is a very serious and important question because um, creating a sense of belonging has to happen genuinely from a leadership level because people connect with authenticity and integrity more than anything else. Like you could be saying everything, your walls can talk about culture and this and that. But if they are not able to experience in daily life the behaviors that they see in their daily lives, then it may not resonate. Um, so to me, I believe that leaders can do certain things which can help them build this culture naturally, which is one through active listening. So it's very important to listen actively to encourage different perspectives and create spaces or listening channels where everybody feels comfortable in contributing, right? And then leaders should also be curious enough to ask those questions. They should also be empathetic enough to understand the diverse perspective and sometimes have the courage to be challenged their own biases as well, right?
Right.
Especially in a hybrid environment, belonging requires so much of deliberate effort to ensure that your remote employees also have equal visibility, they have access, they have opportunity, and all of that. And like I said in the start, employees look for authenticity. All right. So they can distinguish between just another initiative than like, a true, genuine commitment, right?
Sure.
So to me, belonging is built through everyday behaviors and decisions, and leadership must be mindful of those.
Sure, absolutely. So there is active listening, there is empathy that should come into the picture regardless of what generations, and especially in multi-generation and hybrid environment where people, even if they don't come to workplace, they are seen, they are heard, and they are being
Yes.
included. So
Yes.
thank you so much for that. My next question, Anmi, is if you can share an example or strategies where inclusive workplaces, they practice inclusive workplace practices directly improve engagement, innovation,
Mhm.
and retention.
Yeah, I think I'll take lead from the previous answer itself, like when I mentioned about listening, right? Active listening. Creating channels for active listening is very important because it's one of the most effective strategies that you can have to build that connect with employees, right? So if you have strong listening mechanisms, like it could be your pulse surveys, be feedback forums, town halls, coffee conversations, you could have multiple forums. And one is creating those listening channels, and two is to be able to acknowledge and address whatever comes out of those conversations and talks, to be able to work on them and get back to them saying that, you said and we did, right? Something like that we follow in our organization as well. So um, that is very important. The other one is to foster a high sense of psychological safety, where employees feel comfortable expressing their ideas. It could be challenging assumptions, or feeling okay to fail and learn from failures and things like that. So I think that creates a sense of engagement in employees because they feel heard. They are given option to fail and learn from that. They're also heard, right? So it improves engagement, it improves innovation, and when all this happens, retention is, it follows, right? Um, that could be one of the things. So the other things could be also around hiring practices, right? How inclusive are our hiring practices? We have like a diverse interview panel. Do we have like a proper and transparent career growth? Is there a progression framework? Most importantly, equitable access to, development opportunities or other benefits and things like that. I've also seen that reverse mentoring program also strengthens the cross-generational, the multi-generational collaboration. And that's also something that most organizations do today.
Sure.
So that's my take.
Sure, quite a few great takeaways here, Harini. Thank you for that. There is creating channel for active listening, and not just listening, but to be able to take action on the platforms that you're creating. So people are, they are witnessing that whatever they say is being considered. Fostering a sense of psychological safety. There is inclusion in hiring practices that you mentioned, which is very, very important. Creating
Mhm.
equal opportunities for people. And last but not the least, the reverse mentoring piece, very, very important in today's times. So thank you so much. This brings us to the last question for today, Harini, which is as organizations move forward, what are the most important mindset shifts HR leaders and business leaders need to embrace to build workplaces where people genuinely feel seen and valued?
Yeah, I think it's just a summary of everything that I spoke. Um, One of the important shifts that leaders need to make is moving away from DNI as a standard loan initiative to recognizing them as business, right? Like that's like the norm, right? We'll have to move from it just being from an initiative to that. Then also, conversation should not just be restricted to, let's say, measuring representation or like, the metrics
Right,
and all of that. Because today we have matrices to DNI initiatives, and we track them and we talk about success with respect to measurements.
right.
While that's equally important because what get measured gets actually done, right? But at the same time, we'll also have to give equal weightage to understanding employee experiences. How are these initiatives translating into employee experiences? And we may want to kind of look at that angle, right?
Yeah.
Um, not only hiring from different backgrounds and all of that, but then also creating those environments to be able to make sure that people thrive is so important. Especially today when we're talking about neurodiversity and hiring people from the spectrum. Uh, how are we able to create ecosystem that can help them thrive? So that is also important. And like another thing which I mentioned previously is from equity, right? Moving from equality to equity. I mean, we of course have this mindset already in the last, I think, 5, 6 years. We've been able to more understand what equity stands for, but to be able to be mindful that different individuals may require different forms of support to achieve the same outcomes um, is important, is what I feel. Um, and most important thing, I always say this as a HR person, that DEI does not belong to HR alone, right? Belonging is not the core responsibility or KRA of HR. Every single manager, every supervisor, team leader, you know, PXOs, and everyone in the organization have an influence in creating a culture of belonging in the company, in making employees feel valued and included, right? So when people genuinely feel seen, heard, and appreciated, they bring their best authentic selves to work. And when they feel belonged, their commitment to work, their innovation, their collaboration, all of that will thrive.
Sure. Thank you so much. What a way to end this. The mindset shift as you started with, love that point where stop taking DEI as an initiative, but it's more like a business imperative.
Yeah.
And then measuring becomes equally important to understand where you are and also understanding the experience at the same time, whatever initiatives that you're taking. Equity as well as equality, very, very critical in today's times. And last but not the least, DEI does not only belong to the HR, but every manager, every employee's responsibility is there. So thank you so
Yeah.
much. It was a pleasure hosting you, Harini, this conversation. Thank you for bringing those insights. You reminded us that diversity is only the starting point. Actually, true organization success really come from how genuinely people feel like they belong to your workplace, so they can thrive, so they can engage, and they can stay. So thank you so much for beautifully bringing those insights today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure, Neha and Team HRIA. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.